Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me all right? In the back, we're good? Okay, realizing I didn't test these mics beforehand, but here we are. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. My name is Amali, and I'm the events director here at Books Are Magic. And to kick things off, I'm actually going to hand it over to Rebecca Cohen, who is the executive director and co-founder of the Brooklyn Book Bodega.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm going to give a quick plug and explanation about Brooklyn Book Bodega. So thank you all. Your tickets tonight are 100% going to our nonprofit. Reading unlocks doors of opportunity, as you all know. And many kids in New York City grow up in book deserts, areas with with few books for sale or lending. And without easy access to books that they want to read, many kids lose out on the opportunity to become lifelong readers and all of the benefits that becoming a reader engenders. So our mission is to increase the number of 100+ book homes for kids 0 to 18 in New York City. And that's because literacy is transformative. Kids who grow up in homes with more books have better life outcomes. They stay in school longer. They have higher financial earnings. They have better mental and physical health.
Yeah.
It seems like a good thing to work on, and we are so thrilled to have George R. Martin's support of our work. To have the folks at Books Are Magic supporting our work, to have John Hodgman here tonight. And I invite you to support our work further. Check out our website, make an additional financial donation, come volunteer with us. Thank you, and I'm super excited for our conversation.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you to everyone else. I am happy to say that ticket proceeds are at least at $2,000 to the Brooklyn Bodega. Thank you all so much. Now I have a few very boring housekeeping notes to go over, and then I will introduce our very esteemed guests, and then we will dive right in. So first, if you need to use a restroom at any point tonight, they are located right by that moleskin spinner on the right side of the room. Thank you, Kevin, for that demonstration. I want to thank everyone who submitted a question for George in advance of tonight's conversation. There will be time towards the end to get to as many of those as possible. And finally, after the talk tonight, George will be around right up here to sign your books. As a reminder, he will sign one item per person, and we'll let you all know where and when to start lining up for that. We do have pre-signed copies of A Song and Fire, of Ice and Fire series available for purchase, though they may be very close to sold out. They are sold out, so if you didn't buy a book already, and if you didn't bring one from home, sorry. All right, and I shall not forget, we do have signed copies of John Hodgman's fantastic book, Vacation Land 2. So if you didn't get a chance to buy any of George's books, you should buy that one. Now, it is my true pleasure to introduce George R. Martin and John Hodgman. George R. Martin is the author of A Song of Ice and Fire that began with A Game of Thrones, now an HBO series. He's executive producer on AMC's Dark Winds, based on books by Tony Hillerman, and the producer of 3 Howard Waldrop short films. George's philanthropic work includes scholarships to Clarion West, Odyssey Writing Workshop, House Toolbox, and the George R. Martin Chair in Storytelling at Medill School of Journalism. George is also the proud owner of Beasley Books and the John Cockchoke Cinema in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where he lives with his wife, Paris. As I mentioned earlier, John Hodgman joins George in conversation tonight. John is an actor, author, and comedian who lives in Brooklyn and in Maine. That's all for me. Please join me in giving George and John a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Amali and Rebecca, and Brooklyn Book Bodega. And hi, George.
Hello, good to see you again.
You can and hello to everyone on
I should. Is this
the
working?
live stream.
Hello. Yes.
Hello, that's George. I'm John. In case you were confused, we both have beards. And I just want to say thank you for inviting me. I always enjoy chatting with you. We've done this a couple of times.
We have. It's been fun.
And it's nice to do it in support of such a great cause. Households with 100+ books are obviously a great aspiration for any child who is growing up there. I certainly grew up in a house with at least 100 books. It's not just that you get great reading opportunities, but you have more things to put your mugs of coffee on, for example. And if Brooklyn Book Bodega needs 100 more books, I've got easily 500 copies of Vacation Land in my car trunk right now, which I can just give away. But anyway, George.
It's full of very valuable hints, Vacation Land, like do not burn your raccoon
Feces.
feces. Yes.
Yeah.
That'll cause a lot of problems. So.
First of all, you should never be in a position where where the raccoon feces is yours. First, don't own any.
No.
Second of all, don't burn it. Third of all, don't go near it because it's more than likely infected with a parasite that can kill you. So that's just good advice from George R. R. Martin and me. But we're going to talk about the value of reading. And let me ask you, when you were growing up in Bayonne, New Jersey,
Right.
How many books did you have in your home? 100+? Yeah.
Well, no. We had very few. I don't think my father ever read a book that he didn't have to read for school, and I'm not even sure he read any of those. My father was a longshoreman. He worked on the docks in Bayonne, unloading ships, and in the Brooklyn Naval Yard occasionally when there were no ships in Bayonne. My mother had a few books, bestsellers of her thing, but only, God, probably 20, if that. So we were not a big book reading family.
Mm-hmm.
There was a point though when I have two younger sisters when they I'm wandering off this where they started buying magazines and bringing them to the house, and they were confession magazines. Any of you remember confession magazines? They were all supposedly true stories. There were no bylines by authors. These were all true stories.
Sure.
About about
that baby knows
women who had done horrible, tawdry, sinful things and had learned better, and at the end they always were with the nice guy and they lived happily ever after they got rid of the bad boy. So those were around, but no, there were no books I read.
Is that how you discovered your love of reading? Was reading confession magazines?
No. It was probably worse. Comic books.
Oh no.
Comic books. I was a comic book fan. Of course, I went to school. We went to a public school, and in that public school, they taught us to read. And they taught us to read. I say young people here. They won't know what I'm talking about, but the older people might remember. They taught us to read with books that they called readers, and you would read these readers, and they were all about the adventures of Dick and Jane, who were a brother and sister, and they had a little younger sister named Sally, and a dog named Spot, and they were the most boring family that had ever lived on the planet Earth. And also, to me, living in Bayonne, New Jersey, an industrial kind of city, I was playing stickball in the streets, and the Chevy was second base kind of thing, and these people lived in like an alien planet. It was like the suburbs. They had big separate houses with lawns and white picket fences, and who the hell were these people? I don't know, but I had no interest in them. But fortunately, there were comic books, and Batman was up to far more interesting things than Dick and Jane and Sally ever could hope to be. And Batman and Superman and later on the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man saved my life in that regard. Also, I was given by an old childhood friend of my mother one year for Christmas. She gave me a hardcover science fiction book, Robert A. Heinlein's Have Space It Will Travel. And I read that book, and God, it completely hooked me. I read it, and then I had to have more Heinlein. I had to have more science fiction. I had to have more books. So then I had to adjust my income because I had $1 a week allowance. which would allow me to buy 10 comic books when they were a dime, but when they went to 12 cents, it was a little crisis there.
Well, then the math is just beyond me on that one. So
Yeah.
I just give up.
But then if I had to buy a 25 cent or a 35 cent paperback, that was even harder. But I did. And I read the books, and that I never stopped.
Was it the Have Space You Will Travel or another book that you were reading when you said, I want to do this with my life. I want to tell stories as opposed to just absorb them?
I went through several stages in that. I think in the beginning I wanted to be because I was also watching TV and all that, and I like science fiction stuff.
Sure.
So I wanted to be a spaceman. We didn't have the word astronaut back in the 50s. That was not coined yet. It was spaceman. And my friends wanted to be cowboys or policemen. I wanted to be a spaceman, like Rocky Jones or Tom Corbett. Um, at a certain point, I realized I probably wasn't going to actually make it as a spaceman. So I could write stories about spacemen or draw them. I could do comic books. I could be a comic book creator and artist. And I started doing a little of that. The inability to draw turned out to be a challenge.
A challenge,
there.
sure.
Yeah. So I just started writing the stories in prose and placing them in comic book fanzines. You know what a fanzine is? It's a little amateur.
I'm quite elderly, yes. I do know what a zine is, what a fanzine is.
Yeah, amateur.
But for the baby in the audience, these are amateur publications that were usually run off on a school mimeograph machine or the Xerox machine, if it were that, right?
Or the Ditto machine, which was a weird thing with a tub of gelatin.
Oh, that sounds so good.
And purple. It always came out purple. You could make like 20 copies with a Ditto. That seemed a lot to us back at that thing. So I wrote some of those things, and they were published, and people like them, which it's really amazing to think of it as something that can change lives, and certainly changed my life. Some guy in God knows where he was, Omaha, Nebraska, or Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, or
two of the great God knows where places.
God knows where, yes. But he read my story of Power Man versus the Blue Barrier, and he wrote a little letter and said, "Oh, I read the George Martin story. It's really good." And just that kind of thing, the little tiny affirmations that I got, made a huge difference.
So this was something that you published in a zine?
In a zine, yeah.
And someone wrote a letter in saying that was a good thing.
That is, yes.
And it was called Power Man versus the Blue Barrier?
Well, that was one of them, yes. I also did the strange
Tell me more.
Saga of the strange saga of the White Raider. That was, you'll hear today, if you're in fandom, you'll hear people talk about fan fiction. And you also hear that I don't like fan fiction. I'm opposed to it. Now, that's because the meaning has changed. Today's fan fiction are people who are writing stories about television show characters or book characters who are owned and copyrighted by other people, corporations, or all of that. I never liked that. I in my day, in the 50s and 60s, fan fiction was fiction written by fans. There was no money on it. But we invented our own characters. I invented, the White Raider. I invented Garazan, the Mechanical Warriors, and I wrote stories about them. I didn't try to lift Spider-Man or Superman and write stories about them. So, from my mind, that was the big difference. But I wrote these stories, and they were well received, which I think, kids need. Kids need that.
Yeah.
Kids need the applause and the affirmation of that what they're doing is something worth doing, and it made all the world to me because the life I was living.
And I happen to know that you had been a writer of fan letters to comic books.
Oh yes. Yes, he did.
One of our first conversations, I found a letter that you wrote to Marvel Comics Avengers, lamenting the death of a minor character named Wonder Man.
I didn't lament it. I loved it.
Oh,
I loved it. They
sorry,
killed
celebrating the death of Wonder Man.
Yes, I actually I wrote a number of letters to the Marvel Comics of the day. That's how I got involved in fandom. They would print your letter in a letter column, and they would put your full address
Your
at the
literal
end,
address.
and people would write letters to you, and that's then you would make friends from all over the country, and they would send you your fanzines and all of that stuff. But in Fantastic Four number 20, I had my first letter published, um,
Oh,
telling how brilliant Fantastic Four number 17 was. And then I wrote quite a few more letters to Marvel's Dear Stan and Jack, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, or Stan and Steve. It was one that Ditko had done, and they would print them. And of course, I love that. With reservations, I think. In one of
I
those,
mean, that's pretty much literal fan fiction right there. I mean,
yeah. I remember one of the letters I wrote, not the first one, but I said something to the effect of Shakespeare, move over because Stan Lee has arrived. Stan chose to publish that letter. I don't
Sure,
know.
I wonder why.
I wonder why. And yeah, there was that one. But that Avengers number 9 that you're talking about, yeah, that was a thing where
Well, you
the
loved
Avengers.
you loved the death of Wonder Man. Why?
Yes, Wonder Man joined the Avengers, and he was really a villain. He was in the thralls of one of their ongoing villains, who had created him, given him powers, and made him join the Avengers so he could destroy them from within. But then during the course of the story, he found he could not did it because he liked the Avengers. They were friends, and he didn't want to be a villain destroying
Cool,
them
lived in
from
a
within.
mansion.
So
Yeah.
he instead saved them. But of course, that cost him his life because the big villain killed him. So we met Wonder Man, and then he died in the same issue. And of course, if you've read any of my fiction, you may notice I have a certain reputation for killing for killing characters. That was a lot of that was Wonder Man. They killed him, man. He was the hero, and they killed him, and it took me by surprise. And I liked being taken by surprise. I liked, because there was the DC comics was the other thing, and they never surprised me ever. The DC comics were always what they were, and you always knew Superman or Batman was going to win, and the villains were going to lose, and nobody was going to die, and not even Alfred the Butler or
As
Jimmy
much as we
Olsen.
might all want him to die.
They would all just live and
Yeah.
live and recover. And
So, what did killing a character in fiction? Obviously, this is not a real person. There is no Wonder Man.
right?
You had barely known him. What did it mean to you as a reader to feel that happen?
Well, it had an emotional resonance,
Yeah.
which I think for me at least that's the reason that I write fiction and the reason I read fiction is emotional experiences. We want to be, at least I want to be moved by this. I want to feel good. I want to feel bad. I want to, and a lot of fiction, especially comic books and pulp fiction and stuff in those days was very, very predictable. Even at a very early age, I was tired of predictability. Probably my mother's fault. We would watch TV, gathered around our black and white TV in the living room, and I Love Lucy would come on, and there would be this conveyor belt with chocolates, and my mother would say, "Oh, just watch, the conveyor belt's going to be moving faster and faster, and she won't be able to keep up with the chocolate." And then it would happen just the way she said. Oh my God, my mother can predict all of these things, and she did. But I got pretty bored. I didn't want to do the predictable things, so Wonder Man was unpredictable. To be honest, though, 20 issues later, he came back.
Sure.
So that's the thing. That's the thing with comic books. They always come back.
The very, very famous episode of I Love Lucy. I don't know if the baby has ever seen it, but very famous episode. She tries to keep up with the chocolates, but it was actually they reshot it. The original ending, Lucy died.
It's
And they're like, this is too surprising.
very traumatic. Yeah, very, very, very traumatic.
You famously,
Oddly enough, Stan Lee, who's the editor of Marvel Comics,
Yeah.
and all of these things,
better than Shakespeare, I hear.
better than Shakespeare. He wrote and edited all these things, and he was the guy who did a letter column and printed my letters. And Stan was one of the giants of comic books in that period. And many, many years later, I would go to the San Diego Comic-Con, which is an amazing convention, and you go to it. And by then I was an established writer. I had published a number of books and a lot of short stories. I had won and lost major awards, and I got to meet Stan Lee. I was introduced to him, and then a couple years later, I went to San Diego Comic-Con and I got to meet Stan Lee. I was introduced to him. He had no memory of having met me 2 years before. He never had any memory. I met Stan about 6 times. He was always great, always fun, warm, and told stories, usually the same stories, but it was good. But also at those conventions was an editor named Julia Schwartz. And Julie was the editor of the DC line. He did Silver Age, Green Lantern, and all of that. And Julie also had a letter column where he would print your letters. And if your letter got printed in a DC comic book, as opposed to Marvel, they sent you a page of original art.
Whoa.
Which the artist didn't like, mind you.
Yeah, right.
But as a guy, I really wanted that page of original art. So I wrote all these letters. And Julie never printed a single one of my letters.
Oh, he saw you coming.
But later, many years at the conventions, unlike Stan, Julie knew who I was, and we would have dinner together and hang out. He was a great guy and a hilarious guy. And I always gave him shit about that. And Julie, you never printed any of my letters. Stan printed 20 of my letters in Marvel. You never printed one of my letters. And I should have written better letters.
That's a real editor.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my long ago days in comic fandom.
So you famously have written that a reader lives 1,000 lives before they die. The person who never reads lives only one. When did that sort of become clear to you that reading was expanding your world in that way?
I don't remember the exact date, but I think it was pretty early.
Well, then let's move on. Because I really need the exact.
We were, we lived in the projects in Bayonne, New Jersey, down on First Street. And I went to school at public school, Mary Jane Dunning School on Fifth Street. We lived in the projects. To get in the projects, you had to be poor. You had to do that, and we were poor. My father was a longshoreman. My mother, when I was very young, was a housewife. She raised this kid. A little later, we could fend ourselves. She got a job a few blocks away at Maidenform on the assembly line. So, and that was our income. We did not own a car. We never owned a car. We never went anywhere. My friends would go down the Jersey Shore or, into New York. We would usually get over to New York once a year for Christmas. We would come in on the bus and we would go to Macy's to see Santa Claus, because everybody knew in New Jersey anyway that even though we had a Santa Claus at Woolworth's and Kresge's, and they were not the real Santa Claus. They were
Those
Santa's
were New
helpers.
Jersey Santa Claus.
Yeah. The real Santa Claus was Macy's. And so we had to see Santa Claus, and we went to Radio City Music Hall and we watched the Rockettes. And then we would go out for a dinner at Horn and Hardart Automats.
Oh.
Are you old enough to remember?
Not at all. But I'm familiar with the concept. You would go, they had little doors. You put in your change, and you would get a lemon meringue pie out of a little door.
That's right. Yes,
Yeah.
little brass things here, and coffee and all. They were huge. They were all over Philadelphia, all over New York. I don't know why they stopped expanding then, but they did. and it was a thrill to eat at the automats. I thought they would wave at a future. Why would you want waiters and waitresses and all that when you just go to the automat? And so that was, that was our big trip. We would go into New York around Christmas. Um, but other than that, no, we never went anywhere. So I never got. If you if you ever go to Bayonne, New Jersey, and go down the First Street, you'll see the projects that I lived in, and it's right on the water. I mean, Newark Bay and New York Bay are connected by the Kilvan Cull, the deep water channel that connects the two bays, and ships would go big ships. Not little cruisers or something, but big freighters and oil tankers and cargo ships and all that, and they would go by. I had an encyclopedia. I could look up all the flags. Oh, that one's from Liberia, and that one there is from Nationalist China, and all that. You learned all the flags. But the only place I could see, you looked out the window, see the ships going by. Then on the other side was the fabulous land of Staten Island, and we could see the lights of Staten Island over there. And of course, we had no car. We didn't go to Staten Island either. But I could see the lights. And what wonders must exist over there? So the only way I traveled then was reading. I could read, I could go to Metropolis and Gotham City and DC Books, or this wild fictional place called New York and Marvel Books. And I could read, books, Barsoom, Middle Earth, all the great, amazing worlds of fantasy and science fiction. I could travel to those worlds in my mind. And I don't think I actually left the United States until 1981, really.
Oh,
We just did not travel. Now I travel all over the place, so here I am. Hi. um,
let's go to Horn and Hardart later.
yes,
Yeah.
why not? Um, but that did open my mind to all of the things that can exist there.
It was
They
a way
could
to
exist
it was a
in our
way to
imagination.
travel and
Right.
and to be a spaceman. I mean, my
right.
memory is how
Yes.
Spacesuit Will Travel is about a kid who finds a spacesuit or wins it in a
Wins
lottery or something, or
wins it in a jingle contest
right.
for a soap, I think it
Yeah,
is. Yes.
and literally is putting on a spacesuit and becoming what you dreamed of becoming. And even in a fantasy context, for a kid to see another kid doing something that they dreamed of, they feel seen as a result in a way.
Um, those Heinlein juveniles were actually fantastic. He was the leading science fiction writer of his day, but in addition to his adult books, he wrote these. He had a contract with Scribner's to write one juvenile novel a year, and he did it for like a decade. They're some of the most classic. We would now call them YA books, but they didn't use YA back then. They used juvenile.
Well, speaking of juveniles, were any of your friends and peers, and when you were a kid, reading what we call genre now, science fiction, fantasy? Or
Once I discovered Heinlein, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, after I read How Space Will Travel, I looked for more books by this guy and more science fiction books. We had no bookstores in Bayonne, but we did have what we called candy stores, which were really. When I used that in the Midwest in later years, people thought I meant like a Fanny Farmer or something. No, a candy store was, I don't know, a bodega. They would have candy. They would have a deli section in the back. They would have some shelves with canned foods on them, and they had a rack of comic books. But right next to the rack of comic books was a spinner rack with paperback novels of all sorts,
Yeah.
completely mixed up, no genre sorting, anything. So I might be looking for Heinlein, but I would run into Dickens
Yeah.
or whatever, or nonfiction books. I would run into How to Win Friends and Influence People by
Dale Carnegie, right?
Dale
Yeah.
Carnegie, yeah, and all of that stuff. And there was some the mystery novels always had very sexy covers. Women with like lingerie. Oh,
Sure, I don't know
these
what
are
you mean.
interesting. I don't know what. Yeah, let me take a look at this. Maybe it's got something in it. Yeah.
But, speaking of genre sorting, I worked in book publishing in the 90s. And at that time, we were all pretty sniffy about horror, science fiction,
Right.
fantasy, what we called the genre. Obviously, I think things have changed in culture a lot with regard to genre, in no small part due to the success of Game of Thrones, and obviously they're huge phenomenons, both among adult readers and younger readers too, in terms of reading what we call genre. What do you think about that?
Well, the genres have changed, for one thing, as tastes change. I remember those old spinner racks, and there were genres there that don't exist anymore. The nurse novels was a big thing.
Ripe for a comeback, I said.
And gothics. Gothics were, the covers were like all the same, but all different. There would be like a Victorian kind of setting, and there would be a woman in fleeing from a dark house behind her, which would have one light in an upper window, and she would be running out on the moors, and she was some sort of governess or teacher, but there were bad things there, and those were very popular. I was looking for the science fiction books, and there wasn't much fantasy in those days. That time in the broad thing of imaginative literature was really dominated by science fiction, much more than fantasy.
Yeah.
It wasn't until Tolkien came along that suddenly that really started to change. But yeah, it was a different time, and it's still a different time. I was just talking with the bookstore owners here, and as I did it over the weekend at San Diego Comic-Con, or New York Comic-Con, rather, and they were telling me that the number 1 genre today is romantasy, which is people have combined romance with epic fantasy. So are you guys all romantasy readers?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's very cool. The nurse novels are gone, but the romantasy novels are here.
It's like your books, but a happily ever after.
Someone in the front row said,
Like
it's like your books, George, but happily ever after. Wonder Man doesn't die every time.
We get to keep one of it.
That's right. And I think more sex than my books.
Oh, yes. The spicy scenes are.
Spicy scenes in romantic. You should buy some romantasy while you're here.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
You know what? Get a couple of 100 copies and give them to kids via Brooklyn Books Today.
Yeah, but the genres do rise and fall in popularity. I mean, Stephen King, who's still an amazing author, but when he really broke through in the 70s and 80s, God, he broke through huge. So suddenly every publisher wanted a line of horror. And I remember walking into like a B. Dalton, and it's like, this entire front section is paperbacks with black covers in which the title is in dripping blood letters.
Yes. Raised red foil dripping blood titles.
And that lasted for a few years, but then discovered that just a dripping blood letter doesn't mean you're Stephen King. So,
speaking of which, we are approaching Halloween.
ooh,
Do you have any scary book recommendations?
ooh, scary book recommend. Well, Stephen King. I mean, to start with,
Sure.
I think he's still the number 1 writer of classic horror.
Or not to put you in a corner, is there like a book that you remember that has been forgotten somewhat that you wish people would read today, or just any recommendation that you would offer?
All right, let me.
I mean, first of all the books by George R.R. Martin, obviously,
of course, yes.
highly recommended.
I mean, even horror has changed, though. I like horror movies and all that, but I can't say I like Frankenstein and Dracula and the Wolfman. I don't like Freddy and Jason and Leatherface so much as
First name Leather, last name Face.
That's right. I'm sure those are very good too, but yeah. But I did love the old Universal monsters, which they keep trying to revive, but
Yeah.
not. Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein's just opened.
Oh, it's opened already.
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Well, let's go. Come on, everybody.
Even a man who is pure at heart and says his prayers by night can become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright.
George R. R. Martin, everybody. Wow.
That's from the Wolfman.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Thought that was a Frankenstein one.
Universal Pictures. Lon Chaney Jr. and Claude Rains. It's one of the first great werewolf movies, and three different people say that poem at various points. It's a very cool little poem, written by ancient werewolf poem, written by a Universal screenwriter in the 30s.
This is
But yeah,
not some. Well, I mean, I will recommend something to you then.
Right.
If you didn't see it from a couple of years ago in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, their Werewolf by Night adaptation with Gael Garcia Bernal.
I did not see that.
If you like 70s Marvel comics, this really channels that. And it's a wonderful, universal, black and white, scary story that really is in that old mode. That's really a lot of fun. So that's my recommendation. It's not a book, but I don't know. Give it to the kids.
It's interesting to,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a little sidetracking discussion here, but to look at horror movies and TV shows and books, and because we're living in what I find a very troubling age, which is an age of cancel culture and censorship. We just finished book banning week, and hopefully
And we got a lot banned, so congratulations us.
And that irritates the hell out of me. I'm a total free speech guy and a total no, don't ban that, don't ban that, don't ban anything. Stop taking things off library shelves and out of bookstores and out of classes. Come on. Do you want your? It's supposed to be protecting the kids. You just make the kids stupider.
And you're making their world smaller.
Yes.
On purpose. I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? I mean, like, I remember I was up in Maine and was talking to the principal of the public school there. It's not about books, but she wanted to take the kids to visit New York City.
Right.
And one of the parents there said, if you want them to see an escalator, take them to Bangor. Because they were terrified that if their kids left the state, they would never want to come back. And that's, I think, a lot of what banning books is about, is keeping kids in a very narrow worldview. You know?
They may have been right about that, but
It's true.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want that, and I don't know. I guess I was a mutant. I wasn't a normal kid there in Bayonne, but believe me, and anyone who had told me you can't read this book, that was a sure way to get me to read that book.
Absolutely.
That was in the Bayonne Library. There was the kids section, and I went through that pretty quickly. And then I found ways to get back to the adult section and get some of those books out, and they were, good.
That's great.
Is there any kid out there who actually just, I'll just read the books that mom and dad want me to read? No.
No, right?
Right.
We have some questions that were submitted from the audience that I'd like to read to you as soon as I find them here on my phone. There they are. And why don't we do this with some audience participation? Yell out a number between 1 and 9.
7.
7 is the first one I heard. Thank you very much. Do you take inspiration from real life people for your characters, particularly the villains?
Yes and no. I mean, I think characters come from a lot of places. I read a lot of history and historical fiction. So I look at particularly with Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire. It's quasi medieval. So I'm reading about kings and dukes and various people in history, and some of those do inspire me. Characters from other people's books sometimes inspire me, usually in the context of I almost want to argue with them. I want to have a literary discussion. I see the way some other writer has done this particular character. No, it wouldn't be like this. It would be like this, and I do my own version of the character. But yes, particularly, if you know my books, you know that there are. I have a lot of characters, but the viewpoint characters are the ones you. I believe in viewpoint. I don't believe in omniscient viewpoint. So you're inside someone's head. You're experiencing the world. You're seeing it through their eyes. You're privy to their thoughts. Those characters, I draw a lot on myself and the people I've known in life, and occasionally people I read about in the newspapers or history books. But I'm really inside the skin of those people. Now, if it's not a viewpoint character, I'm not inside their skin, so it's a different process where you're reading about what did Attila the Hun do, or what was Julius Caesar like. We don't really know, but we can work on that. So, different characters have different origins. I think.
I'm glad you brought that up because truly one of the things that I took away from reading your work is just how, and I don't know that you get as much credit as you deserve, is how fully you inhabit vastly different characters from different worlds, different viewpoints, different social strata, different genders, different points of view. And that's just a compliment. I mean, you don't have to respond to that.
Well, thank you.
And I was going to ask you how you did it, and then you answered it before I even asked.
And that is challenging. That's one of the toughest things about doing it, especially if the character, the viewpoint character you're writing about, is notably different from yourself. One of the things they'll tell you if you're a young writer starting out is, "Oh, write what you know." And I was told that like generations of writers after that. I hated that advice because I didn't know anything. I lived in the projects. My world was 5 blocks long. From Fifth Street was my school. First Street was where I went. We never went to Staten Island. We went to New York once a year to do that. I didn't know what the hell was I going to write what I know. I didn't even know my father's job. He worked on the docks unloading ships.
He was a longshoreman.
He was a longshoreman.
Just in case you
Yes.
wanted to know.
He was a longshoreman, but was there a lot to know about that? I don't know. Actually, I worked one summer sort of in his job and decided, boy, I do not want to be a longshoreman. So I knew that. But no, don't write what you know in that sense. It's not a, I worked in a candy store, so now I'm going to write about a guy who works in a candy store. It's the emotional truth. You have to get inside the heads of these characters. And what are their dreams? What are their fears? What are the kind of experiences that they went through in the larger world? Did did they live through World War II or Vietnam War? If they lived through the Vietnam War, did they go to Vietnam or did they not go to Vietnam? And how did this affect them? And that's where I think the truth of right what you know.
And once
kicks
you've
in.
figured all of that out, then you kill them.
Right.
Yeah. Give me a number between 1 and 9.
Actually,
I heard 3, but go ahead. And then 4.
yeah, the killing them thing is interesting. I did a interview a couple years ago with Anderson Cooper, and he raised a
I
well.
know
You
you
have
let
this,
other people interview you. You don't have to.
you have this reputation for killing a lot of people, and I said I don't. It's not a. I don't know. Star Wars kills more people than I do. I said. Look at Star Wars, the first movie. They blow up the planet of Alderaan. There are billions of people living on Alderaan. Billions, and they're gone in a sentence. Alderaan is gone, and everyone who lived there is dead. And what? I'm killing a person here, a person
really-
there. And Anderson said, "Well, yeah, but we don't care about the people on Alderaan. We don't know them." And yes, that's the key. I'm sure most of you out there have had a grandparent die, had a parent die, a sibling. Some people, the real tragedy, you had your parent yourself, you had a child die. We've all had these things that really make us grieve, and the death hurts us. It gets in our gut, and how does it feel, and all of that stuff. Um, that's what I try to do. I don't kill more people. I just want you to feel their deaths. Um, in television, I've written for television, and you watch cop shows in television, and you'll see death used as an act break. They got 4 acts, and they're about to go from act 1 to act 2, so somebody dies in the last shot. But you don't care about the person who just died. They were not a regular in the show. They were just someone you met in the previous act, and then they are dead. And that's, to my mind, a problem. That is a problem. I've been thinking about that as I follow the news and reading these news stories about the wars. Okay, there's a building is been bombed in Gaza, and 132 people have died, 27 of them children, and that's it. It's like a sentence. So, and it could be the Ukraine, doesn't have to be Gaza. Okay, they just bombed the hospital in the Ukraine, and died so many of them children. It's just a number. It's not. If I was writing that and wanted to do that, I would invent a particular character, a little Ukrainian kid who had American comic books he got from American Friend, and he really liked Spider-Man, and he dreamed of that, and he'd draw. I'd create a character, and then I'd kill him, and you would care about his death in a way you don't care when you just read, hey, we've just killed 312 children.
It's a mere number is given, and it's unbearable to think about each individual, and yet we must.
Right.
I'm gonna skip question 3 for a second because question 8 is so apropos, but I lost it. There it is. Which character death did you wish you could have spared or avoided purely out of personal affection for the character rather than plot logistics? Is there anyone that you wish that you thought, I got to kill him?
Well,
I don't want to.
I've said this in many other interviews, but it was the Red Wedding in book 3 was the hardest thing I ever wrote.
Yeah.
I knew where the Red Wedding was going, and it was about 2/3 of the way through the book. But I skipped over it when I got to it. I couldn't write it. I finished the entire book except that skipped chapter, and then I went back and wrote that chapter because it was a painful chapter to write.
Yeah. Well, now we'll go to question 3, which is a little bit more lighthearted. If John Hodgman was a creature in one of your works, I did not submit this. What kind of creature would I be, and what would be my status in that society?
Well,
Creature? I mean, you don't have a lot of creatures.
I think you would have to be a lord or something like that. Maybe
have to
not
be a
of
lord.
a major house. The lord
All
of
right.
lord of some
Fair.
small little house here. You have 3 knights are
Guy really knows how to draw a character. That's about
But
right.
as I recall, you've had a number of horrible things before you in your cameo roles and other appearances here.
Bad things have happened to me on screen.
Yes.
Yeah, the rule is that if they let me live on the TV show, it gets canceled. If they kill me on the show, it goes on forever.
The Nick comes to mind. Didn't you have all of your teeth extracted?
No, I extracted someone else's teeth on the TV show The Nick,
Right.
starring me and Clive Owen, I guess. And I was dispatched of off screen.
Oh, that's right.
That was one where that should have gone on for a lot longer. Okay. A minor lord of a supplicant house shall go on my resume. Here's one. We know that you are a passionate fan of the New York sports teams. Which Westeros houses?
Oh, there we go.
I lost the bottom of it, but you can see where it's going. What is going on with this? Hang on a second. Which Westeros houses would, I think it's basically like, would be the Jets, the Mets, and the Giants.
Yeah, those are the 3: football and baseball. Yeah. And yeah, what can I say? I guess then I was from Bayonne, New Jersey, and in the 50s, my father was a big fan of the Dodgers, the Brooklyn Dodgers, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and I grew up being a fan of the Brooklyn Dodgers. And in those days, we're talking now ancient times, the 50s. If you were a fan of any of the New York baseball teams, you had to hate the other two. Hate them. Hate them. I fucking hated the New York baseball giants, and especially hated those fucking Yankees.
Yes, thank you.
And every year in the 50s, the Dodgers and the Yankees would meet in the World Series, and the Yankees would win. And until 1955, one of the turning points when Johnny Padres and the Dodgers won their first World Series. And all of Brooklyn went mad with elation, and New Jersey too, because we really liked the Dodgers. And then 2 years later, that fucker took the Brooklyn Dodgers away, moved them to Los Angeles, and yes, that was not good.
Just want to say hi to all the children on the live stream. So obviously the
We-
Yankees are.
I've done other things besides Ice and Fire. One of them was my Wildcard series, which
Yeah,
is an
of course.
alternate world superhero, and it's an alternate world verging off from 1946. So we can change history, and what we did is we gave Walter O'Malley a horrible wild card wasting disease that he dissolved into a puddle of suet, and the Dodgers stayed in Ebbets Field, and they're still playing there.
Well, one of the things about writing is that you can correct
You can.
the world in some ways. You can make it work the way you want it to, including dissolving Walter O'Malley into a puddle of suet, for example.
And of course, a few years later, we got the Mets. So we didn't have Dodgers, but we had the Mets, and they were really terrible. But we loved them. We loved them so much. I don't know if anyone does that. They were the lovable losers.
So obviously the Yankees are Lannisters.
The Yankees he hated the Yankees. Yeah.
Yeah. So who would the Mets be then?
Well, the Mets finally did miracles, and it was so great that they did miracles because it was the miracle Mets, and they won the World Series, and nobody nobody expected that. Nobody expected that. And it was a great joy to me. And then years went by, and then they won more World Series. One of the highlights of my life that did not involve writing and all that was I attended the 1986 World Series Game 6. I had great seats near the first base line in the fourth row, and we could count the stitches on the ball as it went between Bill Buckner's legs. And that was magical.
Yeah, good for you. That was the one year I decided to become a sports fan and decided to follow the Boston Red Sox. The 1 year. Me and Sam Potts, I'm like, I think I'm going to follow baseball this year. He's like, good for you.
Yeah.
And it so destroyed me that I've never looked at a sports game again. But I'm glad for you. We have time for one more. This is an easy one.
Oh yeah.
Since you talked about the
Giants and the but okay.
Oh, well, do you want to do the Giants?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Giants and the Jets.
The Jets.
Yeah, you're right. Let's do this.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I got to explain because people don't understand how I can root for them both. And that becomes of my ancient, I'm very, very old. And when there was only the Giants, there were no Jets. There were just the Giants. And that was I rooted for the Dodgers in baseball and the Giants in football. And the Giants were terrible in those ages. Rooting for them was not a pleasant thing. But then they founded a new league, the American Football League. It was not connected with the NFL. and they had a whole bunch of new teams, including these team called the Titans, who soon changed their name to the Jets. So okay, I'll root for these guys. They occasionally win, unlike the Giants. So that's how I wound up with two football teams, and eventually the two leagues merged. So now occasionally they have to play each other. But in 19, let's see, with Super Bowl three, the Mets and the Jets both had a great year in the same year. It was fantastic. But there was a guy named Joe Willie Namath. He was um, played in Alabama. Was actually from Pittsburgh, and the Jets got him. And he met the devil at the crossroads somewhere and made a deal to win Super Bowl three on the condition that the Jets would lose everything from that point forward. And it worked. He did. Super Bowl three, amazing. Jets haven't won a damn thing since. But yeah.
Well, you talked about how challenging it was to write the red wedding scene. And question number one from the audience, and it's the last one we have time for. What is your favorite scene that you have written?
Boy, my favorite scene.
I don't know whether that means it was the most fun to write, or it could be the most difficult to write, that you were glad it was over, or however you want to interpret it.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what your criteria are. The Red Wedding, it has to rank up there. It took a lot out of me. It was hard to write, but it's a powerful scene that seems to affect everyone who reads it. Um, but there are other things sometimes that I think a writer will respond to and love that the readers don't necessarily even notice. I mean, there's a in one of the later books, there's a scene where Brienne is out searching for Sansa and all that, and she meets this um, Septon, and who's traveling around with his dog, and he's asked, "Oh, there are broken mans in the woods. Are they dangerous? Are they the same as bandits?" And he gives this answer, a fairly lengthy answer about what a broken man is and how they got broken, and I was very pleased with that. It's a monologue, it's a soliloquy, but I think I captured something there, and some of the readers have responded to it. I don't think it's in the show. I think they probably dropped it or something like that. But yeah, that felt good. And sometimes, this will really probably not make any sense, but sometimes something as simple as a description. They're going down a road through the forest. What's it like in the forest? What are the trees like? What are the smells? What are the noises? What do they see? And if you can make that come alive, which was a challenge. I mean, okay, you're the 7,853rd person who's described going through the woods. How do you make it stand out? How do you make yours alive? This is one of the great strengths of Tolkien, by the way, and one of the reasons I admire him so much. And a lot of uh, a lot of today's readers don't like that. I irritates the hell out of me, but I recognize it's changing taste. Tolkien is so dull. What is all these descriptions of the woods and the roads? I don't care about that. Let's get on with the story. Well, fine, but not for me. I want to be there. I want that's the
It's what
stuff.
puts you in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And but people do have different tastes. But I love to, whether I'm writing or whether I'm reading someone else's writing, to go to that place, to live there, to hear the sounds and smell the smells and all of that stuff.
Well, George, I'm very glad that you are in the world and that I'm put in this world with you a little bit every now and then and get to chat with you in front of people. And we're out of time, but we are going to leave George here to sign for you. And Amalia, are you going to come and help people understand what that process is? So, well, a round of applause, please, for George R. R. Martin.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone, keep it going
Thank you.
for George and John. Thank you both so much for sharing this conversation with us. Thanks to all of you for coming out, to everyone who submitted questions, etc., etc. Again, for all of you with us in person and virtually on the live stream, we are sold out of all of our pre-signed stock. But we still have signed copies of John Hodgman's book, Vacation Land.
It'll never sell out.
So George, we'll be signing right up here. We're just gonna slide this table over into this little corner, get all of our speakers and cords and
Do you wanna
whatnot
take
out
a
of the
moment
way.
to go
So just give us
downstairs
a
before the
quick
signing
second to
happens?
get everything set
I'm all right
up
right
on
now.
this
Do you
end.
need anything
And then
else?
once we
I'm
do
good.
so, please make sure that you grab all of your personal belongings with you so that our staff can start to break down the chairs and get our bookstore rearranged. We'll just have you all line up down the center aisle when it's time. I think that covers everything. Thank you all again for joining us. And let's give these two one more round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.